All right, Joel Klatt is with us now. He is on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Of course, you follow him on Twitter at Joel Klatt. See him on Fox Sports. What is up, Klatt? How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you guys doing?
Doing
What's going
awesome.
on?
Not a whole lot. I mean, let's start with your collegiate team, Colorado, going back to the Big 12. Your feelings on that are what?
Well, I mean, it was, in my mind, it was like the only decision that they had. Um, the Pac-12 hit an iceberg, and getting onto a lifeboat is the prudent thing to do. And so yeah, I mean, listen, you can look at it in a vacuum and just talk about obviously the stability of the revenue distribution in the Big 12 after they signed their media rights deal a little over a year ago. The much better exposure that they're going to get in terms of game time windows, linear television versus streaming. All of those things I think are a huge net positive. And then overall, just the attaching your if you're a train car, kind of attaching to an engine that you believe in. And I think that the future of the Big 12 is probably much more stable than the future of the Pac-12. And this notion that like Colorado and maybe if someone else leaves, like they're going to destroy the Pac-12. It's like, no. And again, I'll go boat on the Titanic didn't hit the iceberg, right? The iceberg sank the Titanic. Getting into the lifeboat was the prudent thing to do. And Colorado didn't really have a choice, just like USC and UCLA didn't really have a choice. For the last 10 years, the Pac-12 has made any number of poor decisions, and they're doing it again. They're doubling down on that philosophy. Think about what just came out yesterday about their proposed new, media deal with Apple. It's basically based on a subscriber model, which failed miserably for their own channel, their own network 10 years ago, right? They banked on the fact that owning 100% of a network was going to be more valuable for them. But because they couldn't gin up the demand, they couldn't get it distributed, they couldn't get subscribers, and it didn't work. Owning 100% of $1 is not as good as owning 50% of $20. And so they're going back to that without their largest football fan base, without their largest basketball fan base, and now without Deion Sanders. And I come short to seeing where this is a good deal and a positive deal for those members. And now when you look at what Colorado did, it seems like an excellent decision.
Back to the Titanic analogy, it does seem like the Pac-12 is sinking, and it will be on the bottom of the Pacific in the next couple of years. With that said, it is fascinating what is going to happen to big brands like Oregon and not so much Washington, but they still have a nice brand out there. Do you think they have like landing spots already, and ultimately where are they?
I don't know. I would be really surprised if they're not calling the Big 12 right now. I think they're talking with some of the people that I know close to those programs. I would say that if their perfect scenario would be the Big Ten, obviously. That's not going to happen, at least on a full share. I wouldn't be totally shocked if those teams ended up in the Big Ten on a half share, which would essentially, when you look at the revenue distribution, be about what they would get from a Big 12, but then they would be in the Big Ten. I could see that being a situation, but I don't know if the Big Ten wants to go down the road of creating unequal revenue distribution, because then all of a sudden you look up in 5 years and Oregon is shouting that they get 30 million and Rutgers gets 60 million. So there's not a great answer to your question. I know that, the next 10 years are going to be wild in terms of how college football is being reshaped. I will say this, the Big 12 did an unbelievable job in the last year, because think of when it comes to sports rights, there's a pie, and there's a finite amount of pie, meaning money that you can spend on live sports. And what happened in the last, 24 months is that the NFL commanded $1 billion more per year per network for nothing extra. just because they're the NFL. Well, that cuts into that pie. The SEC and the Big Ten commanded basically a double slice of pie from networks. So now all of a sudden ESPN had to go all in, and Fox had to go all in, and CBS and NBC had to go all in one spot. Well, that left basically one piece of pie left for two people fighting over it. Okay, so the Pac-12 and the Big 12 were the ones that needed a media rights deal, and only one was going to get enough to allow everybody to eat in that conference. And the Big 12 did the prudent thing. They saw the tea leaves, they read the market, and they acted and went to market early, got the deal. And the Pac-12 has had this visions of streaming deals and subscriber deals for a long time. And I fail to see where that's going to work out for them. So I don't know what's going to happen long term. It's a great question. I do think it's going to be quite wild, though.
An observation and a question. My observation is I believe the hat that you wear occasionally with us, the Rose Bowl hat, is a trophy hat. I don't think you ever wear it outside of your building. It's there. Before you jump on with us, you say, my hair doesn't look network worthy. I'm going to throw this hat on. Oh, there you go. So I'm right.
Wow. Wow. Shut it, Klatt.
And secondly, with the Rose Bowl, sadly, this all impacts the greatest bowl game there is, the Rose Bowl. So
I mean,
so
does
what
it
is
though?
the future?
I mean, let's does it impact the Rose Bowl, or does the playoff impact the Rose Bowl to a much greater degree, and the expanded playoff impact the Rose Bowl? Does the Rose Bowl really need the Pac-12 and the Big Ten? I don't know. I think that the Rose Bowl is the most iconic thing in college football, period. Now, if it were up to me, and it's not, it would be the national championship every year, right? Just like the Super Bowl is the destination for the NFL, the Rose Bowl would be the destination for college football. It would be like going to Omaha. We don't have anything like that. We play this stupid national championship game on a Monday night that no one enjoys. And it's like, we should have more of an iconic destination. For me, it'd be the Rose Bowl. People in the eastern part of the country would maybe hate that. I think it's an iconic destination, stadium, and entity. Now, having said that, the Rose Bowl is going to have to find its new identity within the playoff or around the playoff. And I don't think that necessarily means attaching itself to conferences. In fact, the relationships that all these bowls have with specific conferences, and the inability of the conferences and the commissioners to have hard discussions with these bowl games is in large part why we have been unable to fix the postseason in college football for the better part of a century, right? So these things have to be rethought in reality, and in particular with what college football is and needs to be moving forward. I've made this analogy before, probably on this show, but college football playoff is basically like Netflix. The bowl system is basically like Blockbuster. And Netflix didn't allow Blockbuster in board meetings when they were making their business model. That would be silly. So this notion that we've got to be cognizant or take care of these bowls or incorporate them into a playoff, which would water down the playoff, make it worse, and make it more neutral sites, to me, is the wrong way to go about it. You asked specifically about the Rose Bowl. If it were up to me, the Rose Bowl would be the national championship game every year. If not, it would be one of the semifinals every year. It would be the first game of the semifinals every single year on January 1st. You know, those are things that you could do to really move the sport forward and make an iconic brand forefront within the sport for the entire country.
Joel Klatt is with us, college football on Fox analyst, Joel Klatt, at Joel Klatt on Twitter. So we did our 40 teams at 40 shows. 67 members of our audience voted, and a top 25. We built a top 40 out of that. Georgia was number one. Will not surprise anyone.
Yeah.
Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Alabama 4. So our audience has that as the 14 playoff. So we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of days talking Michigan and Ohio State. And it strikes me that Ryan Day has more pressure on him in that rivalry than any Ohio State coach since maybe John Cooper. I don't know. I mean, it's been a while.
John Cooper.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting year
I know.
in Columbus, right? I mean, Ryan's got an immense amount of pressure. He basically doesn't lose ever unless it's either Michigan or the playoff. And that doesn't set well with that fan base. I will go about this, and I made this argument, so forgive me for going backwards in time before we look forwards. Do you remember, I believe it was 2016, when Michigan and Ohio State played that epic overtime game in the shoe, and JT Barrett got a first down on a 4th down carry, and Ohio State wins, and then Jim Harbaugh had this thing hanging over him like he can't beat Ohio State. They almost fire him after the COVID year. And I used to say, like, imagine a scenario where JT Barrett is called short and Michigan wins that game, wins the Big Ten, goes to a playoff. Like, what is the discussion around that? And how does that change kind of the path of Michigan's success or lack thereof up to that point? Well, imagine a scenario where the 14-point lead is hung on to, the field goal goes through, Marvin Harris, the penalty is called, and Ohio State beats Georgia and wins the national championship game. That was like within a whisper. And I'm not saying it should have had, I'm just saying it was within a whisper, very similar to Michigan beating Ohio State in 2016. I never think it's as good or as bad as people think, generally speaking. And so this whole notion that Ryan Day has to win this year in order to save his job, I think is overblown. Now, having said that, there is an immense amount of pressure on him and his team, and he's going to have to do it with a new quarterback, and they're going to have to go to Ann Arbor. And make no mistake about it, this is Jim Harbaugh's best Michigan team that he's ever had. They've got the most coming back. They're the strongest at the offensive line position. They're deep on defense. They've got skill. They've got a quarterback that probably is better than any other quarterback that they've had in the Harbaugh era. So it's going to be a tough lift for Ohio State. But Ohio State, from a roster perspective, is probably the best they've been since the 19 team with Chase Young and Okudah and those guys. So, I mean, these two teams are very, very good. Very good. It won't shock me at all if we've got two Pac-10 or two Big Ten, two SEC teams in the playoff because of the strength of the 4 teams that you just mentioned.
Klatt, over the last 20 years, you've had like 5 mini dynasties. It started with USC and Pete Carroll. Then you could go Urban Meyer in Florida, Nick Saban in Alabama, Dabo in Clemson. Now it's Kirby in Georgia. We asked this question the other day. Who is the next Georgia? When it cycles out, who will be that program that jumps in and wins 2 and 3 or back-to-backs?
Boy, that's a good one.
And to be fair,
I still view it as like none of those that you mentioned have equaled what Nick has done at Alabama. Like, of the 5, Nick's stands out to me.
Yeah.
All the other ones were over one cycle of recruits, and generally speaking, happened with the same assistants. They all happened in a 3 or 4 year span. Whereas, Nick has now done it for 12, 14 years. So they're all still trying to catch Alabama in terms of like the pantheon of what we've seen from a dynasty perspective. But if you're asking me, like, who's the next one that could win a couple championships in a short amount of time, I would give you 2. I think I would go with LSU and Texas would be the 2. If you're just looking at roster compilation, ability to do it. And I know people scoff at the Texas thing, but it's a heck of a roster. We're going to see if they're any better this year. And those would be the 2 teams that I'd be like, I think they could do that. And then the next one being Ohio State. That's the other one. And maybe USC, but that one's much more difficult for me because I don't know how they're going to integrate into the new conference. I don't know how they're going to do playing in some of those venues. I need to see that to kind of believe it.
Yeah, and in fairness, we named all of those, but in that time span that LT threw those out, LSU's won 3 national championships with 3 different coaches in that time.
And that's why that you would immediately say them, right? Because they've done it.
And they've got an elite coach now.
Yeah, and 2 of those coaches were complete idiots. They won championships. I mean, they really were.
Oh man! Wait, which 2? What?
And you bring up Texas, and I, we know what Sark does as a play caller. To me, he's when he was in Tuscaloosa, he was my favorite play caller that Nick has had there. Loved watching him call plays. Are they good defensively? Can they do it defensively this year? That may be what separates them from being national champs or not.
They had a better defense than you think last year, which is wild. But when you actually like break it down, they were the number 2 defense in the entire Big 12. And that's when every SEC fan's eye roll. It's like, Big 12, who cares? But they were they're faster on that side of the ball. I think that they are, to answer your question, they are good enough on defense. I just hesitate. I've got this. So my guy, I've got a guy who basically is like my editorial right brain, if you will. And his name's Steve. He helps me out with everything. He produces the podcast and does all that. And we've made this like pact. We're like, hey, we will not talk about Texas unless they earn it. Because it just seems like every single year we're in this same boat where we're talking about Texas. I bring up Texas only because what you saw last year was a team that lost a few one-possession games that could easily turn around, a quarterback that was young, getting his feet wet. They've got so many starters back, and they've got some of the most talent-rich roster in the country. I believe in Sark. Does it happen this year? We'll wait and see.
Are you and Gus doing Nebraska at Minnesota Thursday night?
Yes. So we'll do that game. Then we're going to do TCU Colorado. Can't wait for that one. And then we're going to do Colorado Nebraska in Deion's home opener, and that rivalry kind of renewed back in Boulder.
So that's the the big noon kickoff, the Thursday night, 7 o'clock, Nebraska and Minnesota in the Twin Cities there. And then as he told you, Colorado, TCU, Colorado, Nebraska.
Two fun coaches, man. Matt Rule, PJ Fleck. I mean, you probably love sitting down with both of those guys talking ball, don't you?
I really do. They're very different, and this is what, by the way, you just hit on this is one of the most enjoyable parts of my job, other than talking with you guys, is that I get to sit down with all these coaches and just see the vast difference between all these guys and how there is so many different ways to skin the cat, if you will, throughout college football, including, Nick Saban with his arms crossed, barking at me in the summer about what it takes to be a coach, and then you got guys like Chip Kelly who just wants to like wax poetically about like there's no crying on the yacht and everything is great. Like it's the difference in personality and style within coaching is incredible, and I think that game encapsulates that a little bit with PJ Fleck and Matt Rule.
Follow Klatt on Twitter at Joel Klatt. The Joel Klatt Show does a great job interviewing a ton of college football coaches and people in college football, and of course see him on the Big Noon Kick and that first Thursday night, Minnesota, Nebraska. Klatt, thank you for the time, buddy. Have a great week.
Real quick, shameless plug. My series of interviews has concluded, which means Monday, in our next episode of the Joel Klatt Show, I'm bringing you my top 25. So Monday morning, check that out on the podcast.
Hey, how about some love for our 67 voters here in the great state of Alabama? 56 of them voted Georgia number 1. 2 of them voted Michigan number 1. 4 of them voted Ohio State number 1. Excuse me, 3 Ohio State and 4 Alabama and 1 LSU. I mean,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good, and I think that ratio is about accurate. Georgia's going to be number 1, right?
Sure.
I mean, listen, the Bama fans are easily of the top fan bases in the country. They are easily the best and most nuanced and most realistic fan base. I know that they are diehard. There's no doubt, and they can be passionate. There's no doubt. But of those, Georgia fans are crazy. Ohio State fans can get a little nuts. Then you get into like the real fringe crazies. Tennessee looking at you. Florida State, wild stuff on the Florida State. I mean, they're wild stuff.
Don't ever piss off UCF.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, don't piss Utah off.
We've been through that. The fake banner. We've been through that. I went after them. They're child's play compared to Tennessee. That Tennessee boy, you better come in there with like, your breastplate of righteousness if you deal with the Tennessee crowd.
Klatt going biblical at the end. Thank you, Klatt. Have a good week.
See you guys.
All right, boy. Klatt with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.